Alrighty, boys and girls, my name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry, Episode 6. In the last video, we got the ball rolling. We are now into the thick of it, or we're hopefully going to be in the thick of it here, with Episode 6, where hopefully things start to piece together somehow. I feel like we're already off to a confusing start. First off, we literally entered to a marriage ceremony of sorts. Whatever you really want to call that. I think Battler got trapped or something. Not sure what the hell happened there. And then we jumped back into the future, or a possible future, following Ange yet again. Even so, through the events of episode 3 and 4, Ange should have been wiped out. She shouldn't have been, I guess it's just episode 4. Regardless, she, got turned into meat. She is no more. But now she's back, thanks to another new character, which reminds me heavily of another character. But enough of that, let's jump back into this and see what we have going on here. At one time, only Beato and her fellow witches had gathered in this smoking room to chat. Now, however, an unusually large number of people were present. And now that it's Battler who is the game master, we are now in a interesting situation where our perspective is going to be, the reader, or the player, or whatever you want to call them. That's now going to be Ange. So how many more episodes until Erica dies? No, jokes aside, I do enjoy Erica's character, but she is a lot. In so many ways is she a lot. Hey, you'll be okay. What was that? Wait, is that true? Is that actually true? Like, no one knows who properly invented chess? It's all coming back to me what specifically happened with these characters in the last episode. Honestly, some true battles of wits, definitely, I would argue we had some crazy back and forths. But goddamn, did some of these events get wild as we continued to introduce more characters just like that, The previous game master, Lambda Delta, had confirmed that Battler understood everything about Beato's game. However, in order to prove it, Battler would have to run this game by himself and carry it through to completion. In other words, if Erica could crush this game of Battler's, she would in effect wipe away the dishonor of that last game. Though Erica was chomping at the bit to get started, it was taking Battler quite some time to show himself. At that time, a swarm of gold butterflies popped into existence and took human form. From the shape of that familiar dress, everyone immediately realized who it was. It's not Beatrice, is it? It is. But how?
おや、ベアトリーチェさんじゃないですか。てっきり前回死んで消えたとばかり。
消えたのはプレイヤーのベアトよ。こいつは駒でしょ、バトラの。
駒ではあっても、ご本人と変わりありません。
Beatrice gave an elegant curtsy as she appeared. This humble entrance was so vastly different from her usual high-pitched laugh that it made the long-awaited start of the 6th game feel even more ominous than it otherwise would have.
お父様はもうじきお越しになられます。
Oh boy.
どうかもうしばらくのお時間をお許しください。
This is reminiscent of the Beatrice that we saw back in episode 3, the one that Rosa described.
お父様、何それ？それが今回の思考？
Not only had Beato started talking in an unusually polite manner, she had also used the word father, presumably referring to Battler, which is weird, and I'm not sure why that is the case, but for an instant, everyone was stunned into silence. But they quickly realized that this was setting up some kind of theme, and they grinned. Beato wasn't the type who could keep up this kind of act for long. It would probably fall apart in a few seconds, leaving her cackling rudely at everyone. Erica, who was itching for a fight, went for Beato almost at once.
まさか無能のバトラさんがあなたのゲームの真相に至るなんてね。
お父様なればこそ深淵を理解されたのでしょう。さすがだと思います。
しかし、あんたもラッキーです。バトラがゲームマスターになれなかったら二度と復活できなかったんですよ。まったく悪運が強いと言いますか。
悪運？
まあいずれにせよ、前回の借りはきっちり返させてもらいますので。
あんたというバトラの妄想幻想。私もみすみすやられるわけには参りません。お手柔らかによろしくお願いいたします。
Okay, so I feel, okay, you know what, I'm really bad at, and understanding anything Japanese. You know, I've been reading visual novels for 10 years and I don't know shit, but I understand that there's different forms of referring to yourself. So is using watashi, different than how Beatrice would regularly refer to herself? By this point, everyone realized that something weird was going on. There was no doubt that the face, the dress, and the hair were all Beatrice's. However, her expression was different. Yeah, her face does look a little different. And maybe that is just me, but it does feel a little off. Even though she had Beato's face, Beato would never show anyone an expression like that. So, okay, maybe it is her, but the expression is not hers.
誰よ、あんた。
There was a heavy silence. Lambda Delta spoke for everyone there. At first, Beato had worn a smiling yet blank expression. However, when she realized that the mood had gone suddenly stiff, her expression finally darkened, and she hung her head. I'm gonna get that signature laugh.
あんた、誰です？ベアトリーチェ教とお見受けしていますが、違うのですか？
Even Delanor was forced to ask, despite the rudeness of the question. That was how much this woman, who appeared to be Beato, was not.
皆さんの期待されるベアトリーチェとは
Yeah, a smidge.
違うでしょうか？
Just a smidge different.
あんた、何言ってんの？まさかとは思いますが、記憶喪失とかなんとか言い出すんじゃないでしょうね。
私はまだ生まれたばかりですので、記憶は何もありません。ですが、皆さんの期待されるベアトリーチェになれるよう、いろいろと勉強を。
ベアト、部屋にいるように言ったはずだ。
Battler's voice came out of nowhere. His tone was very slightly cold. Beato's expression looked like that of a young girl being scolded. And in comes Battler. Oh, whoa. Look at you, man. You're looking crazy. Crazy cool. With a swirl of gold butterflies, Battler appeared. His dignified bearing and appearance were fitting for the ruler of this game. However, his expression was gloomy, and his gaze was directed at Beato.
部屋に戻れ。ここはお前のいる場所でない。
私は少しでもお父様のお役に立ちたくて。
部屋へ戻れ。
He spoke both softly and forcefully. Battler didn't leave her any room for debate, and Beato hung her head and curtsied as she prepared to leave the room.
それから、
はい、お父様。
俺の名はバトラだ。二度と他の呼び方をするな。
はい。
That was interesting. Beato melted into a cloud of gold butterflies and disappeared. This was the first part of the tale with Battler as the game master. The witches had all assumed that he'd come forward with some flashy big developments, so this was all completely unexpected to them. Their mouths were still hanging open.
変わった趣向ね。
失礼した。今のは忘れてほしい。
うまいこと言って。それも作戦のうちですか?
Yeah, whether or not we have to, somehow correlate everything that just happened here with whatever tale will be told here with the pieces, hard to say. It is very strange though, and I was thinking, I'm like, is there any situation where Battler could have been a father? Yeah, probably not. That's kind of stretching things, but it does make you wonder about Beatrice as a person in the actual realm of reality. Who was Beatrice?
また北風対応作戦みたいに印象操作して何かを煙に巻こうって魂胆でしょう。
何かあったのですか?
気にするな。お前たちには関係のないことだ。
そう、なら関係ないってことだわ。さあバトラー、早く新しいゲームを始めてちょうだい。もう待たされすぎちゃって退屈してたんだから。
ああ。第6のゲームを始めよう。エリカ。そしてベルンカステル。これが俺の物語であり、ラムダデルタ。それを仙台ゲームマスターとして見届けてくれ。
楽しみにしてるわ。タイトルは？
ドン、黄金の魔女の夜明けだ。
すぐに沈む冬の太陽だけれどね。
もちろんです、我が主。すぐに引きずり下ろしてご覧に入れます。タイトルだけはグッドです。そこだけは褒めましょう、バト。
気に入ってもらえてよかった。では始めよう。これより第6のゲームを開始する。
I respect and both worry for how composed he is. I hope he isn't going to get cocky with how he put things together here. Battler solemnly announced the start of the game. Compared to his fired-up attitude at the end of the previous game, where he and Erica had sworn to settle everything next time. Well, he was extremely quiet now. Let's see how things go here.
エンジェ、ベアとの様子があまりにこれまでと違うな。私も驚いてるわ。何が何だかさっぱりよ。
Neither do I.
それ以前に、なんでベアトが蘇ってるのかさっぱりだわ。さっき読ませてもらったけど、前回の物語の最後で死んで消え去ったんじゃなかったの？この世界での死は2つある。1つはコマとしてゲーム版より取り除かれること。
And that is kind of meaningless because that's just game-centric.
これはゲームにおける死でしかなく、仕切り直せば何度でも蘇る命だ。
Basically that.
だから魔女たちはその命を奪うことにあまりに無慈悲なわけよね。
To the witch players, the lives of those characters who appear on the game board are no different from pieces on a chessboard that take other pieces and get taken. After all, these pieces will be set up again when the next game starts.
マリアにおける作太郎がその駒の最たるものであっただろう。作太郎がお姉ちゃんの駒？
Yeah, that makes sense. In the game board that represents the inside of One-chan's head, Sakutaro certainly does exist. and as a piece that always stays by her side, though he's nothing more than a stuffed animal in the real world. On One-chan's game board, he's no less of a piece than any other. I think there's a huge hint there, actually.
どうかしら。
The way that things are described there. The way that something is on the game board and how it is in reality. We can take that into effect of, like, maybe how the stories themselves are also being told. There's the actuality of how things are going down, the reality of the pieces, and then how we perceive the game going on. The witches, the wild-ass characters and demons, and the way that events occur.
魔女のゲームの駒なら簡単に生き返らせることができるんでしょ。でもお姉ちゃんの世界では作太郎は蘇ることができなかった。世界でたった一つのぬいぐるみというよりしろが失われたからだ。だから駒の存在条件が崩れ、マリアのゲーム版では復活することができなかった。そなたがその存在条件を再び満たしてやったからこそ、作太郎はゲーム版に蘇ることができたのではないか。確かに。
Maria One-chan was only unable to revive him because she had lost the stuffed animal that was his vessel. If, like the rest of my family on Beato's game board, well, she hadn't needed a vessel for him and she would have been able to revive him as often as she wanted.
そうね。確かに作太郎はお姉ちゃんの駒かもしれないわ。少なくともよりしろが無事である限り何度でも蘇れる存在だわ。そう、よりしろが無事である限り何度でも蘇ることができる。それが駒の命というものだ。それがこの世界での死における一つ目。もう一つはゲーム版の外の存在の死だ。作太郎の話で続けるなら、この場合はマリアの死だ。駒じゃなく本当のお姉ちゃんの死ね。死だけではない。興味や関心の喪失でも同じだ。マリアがぬいぐるみ遊びを卒業すれば、ゲームのプレイヤーとしてのマリアは死ぬ。さながらテレビに飽きてスイッチを切るかのように簡単にあっさりと。なるほど。つまりプレイヤーとしてのベアトは前回までのゲームで勝利を完全に諦めたので死んで消え去ったわけね。ならつまりベアトが再びお兄ちゃんに勝てるつもりになって戻ってきたら生き返るってことだわ。理屈ではそうだ。人も魔女も神さえも興味と関心を失えばいつでも死ねる。そしてそれを取り戻せばいつでも蘇れる。しかし神の世界には時間の概念がないからいつ蘇るも自在だが、矢のごとく時が過ぎ去る人の世ではそれは容易ではないな。そうね。一日のずる休みならともかく3日もサボると学校に行くのがものすごく億劫になるわ。それが1ヶ月、1年、10年、それこそ魔女の世界のように1000年にも及んだら。なるほど。ずる休みもそれだけになればもはや社会における死ね。それだけの長い間死んでいたら社会的な遅れを取り戻せないだけじゃなく、当時のモチベーションだって絶対に蘇らないわ。それはつまり命があっても一度死んだのと同じことだわ。二度と元の自分には戻れない。蘇れない。
I get what they're saying, but trying to, like, envision it myself, it's, I don't know. It kind of hurts.
ベアトは勝てる
If that's a way to describe how I feel.
それを知りつつ気づかぬふりをし、あれだけのゲームを戦ってきたのだ。だからもうベアトは戻らない。彼女の希望はついえた。気を取り直して再び戦う気力のすべてを。だからあのベアトリーチが蘇ることは二度とない。
Okay, so saying it in red, we'll never see Beatrice the player ever again. She's gone. That Beato, who just sat around the whole time with empty eyes in the 5th game, must have been her corpse. It's a pretty good way of putting it, actually, yeah. She managed to remain on the game board despite it all. But then even that corpse was wiped away. So I guess we have to start fresh, through Battler it seems. If Beato had been the game master at that time instead of Lambda Delta, the game board itself would have vanished at that moment, and everything would have ended. Come to think of it, Beato started to lose the will to fight back near the end of the 4th game. When Beato loses her will to fight, the world of this game disappears. However, the witches wanted to keep playing in this game board world, so Lambda Delta bound Beato in place with that cursed shackle. She used that shackle to fix the game board in place and prevent it from disappearing. Even if Beato did lose the will to fight, in chess, this would be the equivalent of removing the set time limit for each turn, making it endless. However, simply having the game endlessly pause on Beato's turn would cause the witches to die from their illness of boredom. That's why Lambda Delta took the position of Game Master. Starting then, Beato's existence was no longer one of the conditions necessary for the game's existence, and that's probably why the shackles binding her to the game board were released. And that explains why she disappeared in the 5th game. Okay.
お兄ちゃんはベアトに真相にたどり着いたことを教えるには一つゲームが遅かったということね。
第5のゲームなどラムダデルタの慈悲だ。バトラの絶対に真相にたどり着きたいという信念に絶対の魔女が慈悲を示しただけのこと。
何が慈悲を？ただの魔女たちの暇つぶしの気まぐれじゃない。話を戻すわ。じゃあ、あのおかしなベアトはプレイヤーのベアトじゃないってことになる。駒のベアトということだわ。
そうだ。だったら誰もがよく知るベアトになるはず。バトラもそういうベアトを望んだは
ず。ぬいぐるみじゃ嫌だったってこと？
When playing with dolls, one can project the personality they most desire onto the doll. However, since you're acting out their part, nothing unexpected can ever happen. You cannot hope for any unanticipated happiness. In the human world, there is nothing so boring as a pre-established harmony. And that's why, though a doll can become a person's best friend in the world, people eventually get bored and outgrow them. Oni-chan only wants the real Beato. He couldn't bear having a doll that only acted like Beato.
バトラの駒として生み出されたベアトはバトラの望む通りに動くだろう。
駒なんだから当然だわ。プレイヤーの指す通りに動く。そしてそれ以外では一切動かない。お兄ちゃんが何を望んでるのかはわかるわ。じゃあこのおかしなベアトは何者なの？
バトラはベアトを本当の意味で蘇らそうとしているのかもしれない。人の子らの諦めきれぬ夢だ。
あんたはさっき赤を使ってそれはないと否定したわ。
あのベアトが蘇ることは決してない。
But a new Beato could.
しかしもう一度ベアトを生み出すことは不可能ではないということだ。忘れたか？第一のゲームの最後でベルンカステル自らがベアトの正体を語ったはず。
思い出したわ。ルールが具現化した存在みたいなこと言ってた。
そのルールと情報が練り上げられ、最終的にあのベアトリーチェという魔女が形作られたのだ。それを再びなぞれば同じベアトリーチェをもう一度生み出し、それをもって復活と呼ぶこともできよ
う。つまりあのおかしなベアトはさながらベアトの卵、あるいはヒナってところね。
It's kind of like I said earlier. It's reminiscent of how we saw Beatrice back in episode 3 in the past, where over at the, was it the Kumadorian? Whatever that other place is, she was locked up there. She was very polite, very passive, very much unlike the Beatrice that we're used to seeing that torments Battler, and sometimes me. And by sometimes, I mean all the time. But, no, I'm definitely following along here. Though, the rule that she's bound to, she's the Endless Witch. Is that the idea that we're getting across here, or am I missing something?
そう解釈するのが妥当であろう。すなわちこのベアトこそがあのベアトへ至るヒナなのだ。
それはつまりこの純情可憐な子がやがてはひねくれてイカれた魔女に成長するってことね。
I guess that's the plan at this point. In other words, that Beato is a baby version of the Beato we all know. So just like how no person is born evil, the newborn Beato isn't evil either. Even though she really is a different person, if you measure her by her root, or perhaps her soul, then maybe you really could call this a resurrection. However, this reality can't possibly be easy to accept. Though she may technically be Beato herself, she is also, without a doubt, a different person. And that way that she acts would make anyone feel as though something's out of place.
退屈しない。そなたの朗読は楽しい。
あんたに朗読が必要なのか疑わしいわ。あんたはもうすでに全てを知っているように見える。
Is this how it is with a lot of you guys watching? You know, like, you know, a lot of you who watch my playthrough, you've already read this, you know? But, and you kind of already know what to expect, more or less. Or maybe this is your first time going through, but you could also read it yourself, you know? But is it really different if I'm reading? Well, I guess I wouldn't really have much of a viewer base if that wasn't a yes answer, you know? So, hey, thanks for being around.
そなたと対話をしているからその思考に至るだけだ。我が思考は八百万を束ねて超える。人の子にはまるでそう見えるだけに過ぎない。
Though I guess I do have to say, you know, similar to what she said, if there was no me rambling conversation to be started, stuff like that, yeah, it probably, this probably would kind of suck to watch, huh?
最初からそういえばもっと素直に朗読を引き受けてやったのに。
私の機嫌が良くなっただけのこと。浮かれるな。私はお前の命などしおり代わりに挟んだまま放出する木の葉よりも軽んじているぞ。
続きを読んでください。おねで解釈するわ。OK？
退屈しない。そなたは巫女として優秀だ。
I don't know if I said this in the last video, but I think she needs the garb, honestly. She's got to wear it. Featherine rocked back in her rocking chair and looked up at the ceiling, laughing as though the conversation itself was pleasant for her. Ange was slowly figuring out how to deal with this strange witch. This person was also bored. It's not uncommon for a sick person who's bored from being bedridden for a long time to start acting rebellious. On the other hand, they can also get a little bored of being treated kindly all the time. She may want to be shown respect for her superiority, but it's probably more interesting for her when she's spoken to rudely. What a coincidence. That's exactly how I used to be. Oh, Ange will do her job well here.
第4のゲームでベアトとお兄ちゃんに何か確執があったことは間違いないの。このベアトを知ることは真相に至る鍵の一つになりうるわ。
そうであろう。私も興味を持った。彼女の物語も合わせて読むのだ。
はいはい。仰せのままに我があるし。
When Ange raised her hands like a conductor, the bookshelves in this bizarre study responded. Once again, several books floated out and began to swirl around Ange. Oh, we know this place. Kinzo's study is the room belonging to the master in the human world. So this study in the world of non-humans belonged to the master of the game board, and was a place where he could look down upon the humans. Therefore, one could hardly be blamed for mistaking the imposing, berobed man in the center of the study for Kinzo, if only for a second. But it wasn't Kinzo. This was Battler, the one who had taken up the position of Game Master, becoming the new territory lord of this world. Around Battler was a swirl of glowing fragments sparkling like the night sky. and on the floor was what appeared to be a red magic circle. To an outsider, it would seem to be nothing more than an incomprehensible geometric shape. But to Battler, who stood at its center, it was the outline for a new tale. A new line grew across the magic circle, following Battler's gaze. Then, at the instant it connected with a complicated symbol, the entire magic circle flashed brightly. I have no idea what's happening here. But do I ever?
どうだ?
見事です、親方様。第6のゲームの完成でございます。
Thank you, Peace Genji. As Battler wiped his forehead and finally relaxed, Genji, who was standing behind him and watching over his every move, nodded deeply in response.
俺はゲームマスターってのはもっと好き勝手に物語を作っているものとばかり思っていたが、想像以上に骨が折れるな。
複数の物語を描き、その表裏を合わせねばなりません。それにしても初めてとは思えない見事なお手並みでした。エリカ様もきっとこのゲームならご満足いただけるでしょう。
And by satisfied, we will piss her off greatly.
探偵殿の好みに合うといいんだがな。しかしベアトを純粋に尊敬するぜ。よくあんなややこしい物語をあっさりと作ってみせたもんだ。
あっさりとではありません。ベアトリーチェ様も深く深く悩み、物語を生み出しては矛盾に悩み、常にロジックエラーと戦われておりました。
ロジックエラー？
物語の表裏が合わぬこと、これが生じるとロジックエラーと呼ばれる致命的な反則手となり、即座にゲーム版は破綻、魔女側が犯せる最大最悪のミスです。
ベアトのゲームも何度かそれに抵触しそうになったのか？
ゲームを生み出す際には常にそれと戦われておりました。特にバトラ様が手強くなられてからは相当の苦労をなさっていたようです。
I want to say it's like that with a lot of stories where you're trying to really follow along and piece things together, whether it be mystery or something else. If somebody's writing a book or a series and there's multiple things going on that have to all be concurrently happening and being able to connect back at the end or at various points, yeah, I can see how there could be some, possibilities for some problems. But it also makes the world more believable. It makes it all the more, well, not only interesting, but it keeps it all together in a solid state.
今回の俺のこのゲームはベアトに見せても恥ずかしくない敵かな。
はい、それはもちろんでございます。
ベアトはまだ目を覚まさないのか？
Oh yeah, we sent her to her room.
ルールの擬人化から体を蘇生してもうだいぶになるはずだ。まだ目覚めないのか？
After remaining silent for a while longer, Genji answered.
3日ほど前にお目覚めになっております。バトラ様が第6のゲームの設計に集中されておりましたので、お知らせを控えておりました。申し訳ございません。
そうだったか。あいつめだいぶ長いこと寝てたから寝ぼけてやがったに違いない。あいつにぜひ俺のゲームを見てもらいたかったんだ。いや、あいつに俺はゲームを見せなきゃならないんだ。俺が全てを理解したことをあいつに教えなきゃならない。
Battler's face broke into a smile. There was no trace in his expression of the hatred he had once felt towards Beato for murdering his family.
ある意味、これが第5のゲーム最後の謎だったわ。
そうだ。バトラは真相に至ると同時にベアトに対する心象が大きく変わった。
And I think that's a huge connection into what we have in episode 4. Sort of what allowed things to fall apart in episode 4.
それはつまり、やはりお兄ちゃんとベアトには何かの関係があって、
I don't know. I'm still a little conflicted on that. I don't know if there's necessarily a direct connection between the two. And that's not necessarily the problem that led to Battler's sin either that we learned about in episode 4. But there is something. Maybe not how Ange is describing it here.
それを彼が亡失していたと考えるのが適当なの？
However, Battler suspected this in the 4th game and asked Beato about it. According to the tale, this was denied by the Red Truth. 6 years ago, no person called Beatrice existed for Battler.
6年前にベアトが存在しなかったとも受け取れるし、6年前にはバトラと縁がなかったとも受け取れる。しかしいずれにせよ、バトラはその後6年間、ロッケン島には訪れない。
ベアトリーチェとお兄ちゃんはこの1986年10月なのに、どうしてすでに確執があるの？さっぱり意味がわからないわ。
第4のゲームでベアトがバトラに問いかけたUshiromiyaバトラの罪に何かの鍵があろうな。
No, I agree. I definitely agree.
その結果がベアトリーチェという存在なのかもしれない。
その結果？お兄ちゃんの罪の結果がベアト？
Well, not only that, but it's also possible that his sin led to things happening the way they did. Which, yeah, I guess is another way of saying, you know, him doing what he did 6 years ago, leaving the family or whatever, led to Beatrice, led to these events, led to maybe even people being in the positions that they're in. Something happened through Battler's choice, or choices. That almost sounds as though Oni-chan created the witch called Beatrice himself.
まるでベアトリーチェとはバトラの駒のようだな。え？6年前のバトラの罪、その罪で人が死ぬ。殺すのはベアトリーチェ。すべてが6年前のバトラの罪から連綿と続くと考えるなら、ベアトリーチェを生み出したのはバトラ自身。まるでバトラの駒のようだと思った。
意味わかんないわ。お
Me
兄ちゃん
neither.
が何かの罪を犯したとしても、少なくとも殺人なんかよりよっぽど軽い何かだわ。それに対する仕返しがこの大量殺人なのだとしたら、あまりにお兄ちゃんの罪と割が合わない。ベアトは親族たちを皆殺しにした。お父さんもお母さんもお兄ちゃんもみんなそれに見合う罪がお兄ちゃんにあったなんて信じられるわけがない。
Okay, but like, there's been stories in the past where, like, you know, you accidentally do something. You make a mistake with something that seems so inconsequential, but that is like the domino piece that allows more domino pieces to fall over in such a way, and then it leads either indirectly or directly to disaster. It has been in stories before. You don't mean to do something. Something may have accidentally been done, or you purposely did something with no ill intent towards anything. But regardless, something happened at point A, and here at point B, we've got Beatrice. Whether or not she's actually a direct, you know, creation of how she is, these events that have occurred, if they're all because of Battler, and we have a family that dies on these 2 days.
罪は測る人間によって重さが異なる。バトラにとって防止できる程度の罪でも、ベアトにとっては6年を経てなお一族を皆殺しにするほどの恨みを持つに値するものだったのかもしれぬ。まあ私もそれはあまりに釣り合わぬと思うし、真相を知ったとはいえバトラがあれだけ親身になるとは到底思えぬ。
Featherine's observation was an interesting one. In a past game, Beato clearly said that Oni-chan's sin 6 years ago was the cause of this 2-day tragedy. I still don't know what kind of sin that was. However, he figured out what it was at the end of the 5th game, and he even apologized to Beato, even though she was the witch who had massacred his entire family in retaliation for his sin of 6 years previous. Battler apologized to her, Of course, it was the player battler who apologized, not the peace battler whose family had been murdered over and over again. But even so, Battler must have remembered something at the end of the last game that made him feel like apologizing.
その6年前の罪、これまでの物語のどこかにそれが隠されていたとでも言うのかしら。
According to the comments, yes. Yes, something is here. Something that we can, deduce from events that have occurred, I believe is here, as well as the answer to everything. But I'm not quite there yet.
私はすでにある仮説を立てている。
聞かせてよ。
まだ話せぬ。
God damn it.
もうしばらく私だけ答えを知っているかのような優越を楽しむことにする。
続き読まないわよ。
それは困る。しばし耐え、もう少し続きを読め。私の仮説もまだ想像の域を出ぬ。確信を持てたらその時話すこととしよう。
はいはい、我が主。
Or, at least give us a hint, give us like a direction here.
私だって続きを知りたいわ。
Whether or not it's just a thought or not, it could help us out. Just what kind of connection do Oni-chan and Beatrice have with each other? Understanding that will probably give me a massive clue towards finding the truth of this world. After all, because he remembered that, he was able to reach the truth. We'll get there, guys. We'll get there. I believe, and I hope you guys believe too. It would suck if you guys didn't, and it was just me.
Beatrice!
Are we other? I think we're at the other place here.
ベアトリーチェ様がお待ちでございます。どうぞこちらへ。
This place was a villa set aside for Beatrice's use. It was a sacred site for her only, built so that she could spend her days without being affected by the outside world. My heart began to race. I'm so glad that she was able to revive and that everything's okay. Beato is a personification of the rules, so even though she was destroyed once, it's possible for her to be reborn again. Battler had quickly succeeded in reviving Beato's body, but he had had trouble summoning her soul back. However, during the time that he had spent immersed in the creation of the 6th game, she had woken up. And this had happened 3 days ago. Battler let himself be led into the dining hall. The dining hall had been set up for his and Beato's use. It existed so that they could enjoy some black tea while having conversations that were only possible now that he had reached all of the truth. I want to tell her. I want to tell Beato that I found the truth. Battler couldn't hold back his excitement over the miracle that he had been granted, the miracle of Beato waiting for him in the dining hall to hear what he had to say.
Beatrice はどうなんだ？変わりないか？元気そうか？
それはもうお元気でいらっしゃいます。
It's not going to be what we're
親方様がおいで
expecting.
になるのをずっとお待ちでいらっしゃいましたとも。
食堂にいるのか？飯でも食ってるのか？ああ、いいさ。何でも構わない。
驚きますよ。
ベアトリーチェ!
And here we go. When he swung open the doors of the dining hall, Battler was greeted by a wonderful sight. Though the food laid out on the table wasn't particularly sensational, it was arranged beautifully and a champagne bottle stood there waiting. Then the person clad in that familiar dress with the beautiful golden hair bowed deeply in greeting.
ベアトリーチェ。
私に姿を与えてくださり、誠にありがとうございます。
Okay, we have a new character. Oh boy, this is different looking, isn't it? So Beatrice, a new witch reborn from the rules. She has not lived 1,000 years and her behavior is vastly different from how it once was. She is a witch who does not even know how to use magic. However, she has no fear of magic circles or spider webs. Oh boy, that really sets her apart. It is almost as though she is just a human. She adores Battler and considers it her purpose to devote herself to him. Okay, so we have some other entries here. We have Battler, the endless sorcerer and final game master. He is the ruler of the game board and the territory lord. To prove that he has won Beato's game, he must take on the position of game master. By succeeding in this, his victory will be acknowledged and Beato's game will reach its end. Because he knows the whole truth, he exists on a higher plane than all others. I don't know if we need to read everybody else's. We have Erica, the Witch of Truth, temporarily. She is also a detective and calls herself an intellectual rapist. Still, what a crazy title to run with. Participates in Battler's game as the human side player. She possesses numerous skills that qualify her to call herself a detective, and these can even be elevated to the level of Red Truth when acknowledged by her master Bernkastel. Whether she wins or loses, this will be the last game, and there will be no further use for her. Delonor A. Knox. Let's just read through basically everybody's. Not everybody's, like we don't need to go through the seven sisters, but a member of, I struggled last time too with this. Iserne Jungfrau, the 7th District Repentance Enforcement Agency of the Great Court of Heaven, Chief Inquisitor, ranked Archbishop, First Class, goes by the name Delonor of the 10 Wedges or Death Sentence Delonor. She gets the name Death Sentence because, though Inquisitors normally judge their targets to determine whether they deserve the death penalty or not, Delonor, as the Chief Inquisitor, is only dispatched after a case has been vigorously inspected by the Great Court. Therefore, the very act of dispatching her is equivalent to a death sentence. Her father was a legendary Inquisitor, but he broke the rules and was executed. She was the one who interrogated and executed him. Since that time, she has stopped growing, and both her body and mind remain internally those of a young girl. It is whispered that her heart also died at that moment, but she does not see it that way. Her primary weapons are the conceptual arms Red Key and Blue Key. They take the form of a long sword and a short sword, I believe respectively, which we saw a little bit of. We have her two, I guess, pupils, members that serve under her. We have the Great Bernkastel, which is, she's my favorite of these two, definitely. Between Lambda Delta and herself, like, it's definitely going to burn. With the victory of the human side, she should have achieved victory as well, but she seems unable to accept it. It appears that she is less concerned with who actually wins and cares more about how brutal an end might be reached. Therefore, hostile towards Battler as he tries to end this peacefully, she attempts to use Erica to ruin this final game. Lambda Delta, because the end of the game has been assured with the victory of the human side, she no longer stands in opposition to anyone. As a previous game master, she also knows the truth and has taken the position of non-interference. Now she simply acts as a spectator, enjoying her beloved Burn's contorted expressions. I don't know if anybody else has anything going on for updates, but I think we'll just kind of leave it at that for now.
いいんだ。そんなのは。よかった。ベアト。
Battler rushed up to Beato and hugged her tightly, just to make sure her body wasn't just mist or an illusion.
俺はお前の謎をちゃんと解いたぞ。なのにそれを伝える前に消えちまいやがって。
私はここにいます。消えたりなんかしません。
やめろよ、そんな喋り方。本を着せるつもりなんか全然ない。とにかくお前に謝りたい。
For?
そして語らいたい。
About?
何から先に口にすればいいかさえわからない。
私がお父様に謝られることな
No,
ど
here we go.
何もありません。私はただお父様のお役に立てればそれで幸せなのです。
ベアト。
ベアトリーチェはお父様のために生まれてきました。どうかあなたの力にならせてください。そしてお父様、第6のゲームの完成、誠におめでとうございます。
だからそんな喋り方やめろって。うさんくさくてたまらねえぜ。
この喋り方ではお気に召しませんか？部長法をどうかお許しください。
Oh, you're not being rude, actually. It's quite the opposite.
お気に召しませんかってことはねえが、らしくねえぜ。やっぱお前はいつもの口調がぴったりだ。
You know, all crazy-like and shit. Beato smiled vaguely. To Battler, it probably looked as though they were both smiling at the unusual way she was talking. However, Beato's smile literally was vague and uncertain. After all, she didn't know how she was supposed to talk.
それよりベアト、一体これは何の冗談だってんだ？まさか、大ベアトリーチェ様自らが手料理を作ったってのか？
第6のゲームが完成されましたと聞き、ささやかですが、ねぎらいの席が設けられないかと思いまして。
ベアトリーチェ様が、それはもう大層頑張られてお作りになられたんですよ。私は一切手伝っておりませんとも。
The food set on the table really was modest and expertly made. You could tell by looking at it that Beato, who wasn't particularly skilled with cooking, had given it her all. However, signs of discomfort and irritation were beginning to appear on Battler's face.
これはどういうことだ？
ええ、ですから、ベアトリーチェ様が親方様をねぎらおうと。
And that's the problem. Sweat was starting to show up on Kumasawa's forehead. She was also feeling uneasy. When he noticed, Battler realized that it wasn't just his imagination. Beato turned her back to Battler and stuck a corkscrew into the champagne bottle. Then she showed it to Battler.
お父様、第6のゲームの完成、必ずや宿敵、フルドエリカに勝利することを祈願して。
The fuck you mean long-time rival? When presented with a champagne bottle and a sound like that, anyone would think that the cork had been pulled out. However, it wasn't the cork. It was the bottom of the bottle. The high-quality champagne that Beato had procured splashed out all over the floor in her dress. The fuck happened? Then the same sound repeated several more times. Each time, one of the plates of food on the table was knocked into the air. Is it Battler?
お父様、
Is he like
お
throwing
気に召
shit?
しませんでしたか？
お前は誰だ？
私はベアトリーチェでございます。お父様のために生まれてまいりました。
違う。こいつは誰だ？ベアトじゃない。そして俺をお父様なんて呼ぶな。これはどういうことだ？何なんだこれは？ベアトを蘇らせたんじゃなかったのか？源氏、これはどういうことだ？
恐れながら紛れもなくそのお方はベアトリーチェ様でございます。
そんなはずあるか？これのどこがベアトなんだ？全然違う。偽物だ。
いいえ、ベアトリーチェ様でございます。ゲーム版のルールに従い生み出された紛れもなくベアトリーチェ様ご自身でございます。
いや、こんなのはベアトじゃない。ベアトってのはもっとおかしな喋り方をして品のない笑いをして、それから
Okay, but like, again, referring back to episode 3, with Rosa finding that Beatrice there, this is kinda how she acted. This was the beginning for Beatrice, before she died, before she went on to actually become a witch.
いいえ、間違いなく
We have to start
ベ
over.
アトリーチェ様ご自身でございます。
じゃあどうしてこんな喋り方をする？どうして俺をお父様なんて呼ぶんだ？
ベアトリーチェ様はお生まれになったばかりでございます。かつてのような振る舞いをいきなり期待されるのはあまりに酷というものでございます。
まだ記憶が戻らないということなのか？
親方様、確かにこの方はベアトリーチェ様ご自身です。しかし親方様がよくご存知のベアトリーチェ様ではありません。
どういう意味だ？俺はゲームマスターなんだろ？どうしてベアトを蘇らせられないんだ？
ええ、 確かに蘇りましたとも。しかしかつてのベアトリーチェ様は1000年を経られたベアトリーチェ様。一方こちらのベアトリーチェ様はご本人なれど生まれたばかり。違う人間のように見えるのは致し方ないことでございます。
じゃあどうやったらあのベアとは蘇るんだ。体はあるここに。魂はどうやれば蘇る。
同じ1000年の人生を歩めばかつてと同じベアトリーチェ様にもなるでしょう。
Yeah, where's the fast forward button, you know?
1000年を待てと。
人の性格は生まれながらだけのものではありません。その後の生き方や経験によっていかようにも変わります。
I was just thinking about
意味
something.
がわかりますか？
Oh, I understand nothing. We'll be wrapping it up here on that note, but I wonder, what if this is all some massive loop, you know? Like, I don't know how to properly describe it, but what if, like, it's a looping type of situation? There's no way out type of situation. Battler is the cause. Like, he's here from the beginning, he's there at the end. Maybe it's like that. Maybe he's Kinzo. I don't know. It's kind of a shitty prediction, but yeah, I'm glad we're bringing up the big thing here, and that seems to be, you know, Beatrice kind of dying through episodes 4 and 5 and learning that there is a sin. So we've got that to, you know, think about. So that's cool. But yeah, we'll jump in back in the next video and see what we have going on here. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.